My name is Terry. I'm a very low-profile American and a grandfather. I hope you don't mind that I won't be identifying myself further at this point, but I want to make sure that all of the focus of this presentation goes on the message. This message is not intended to entertain you. I'll be making use of various pictures and graphics to help, but I want to keep this all very simple and straightforward and honestly talk to you about the crisis of freedom that we all now face. I'm primarily addressing Americans here, but this can apply to anyone. And it could be a turning point for you and your family if you'll listen and think through it very seriously. This video runs about a half hour, and it may be in parts to suit the web. I believe when you know the truth, it makes you free. Because if you know and understand the truth about things, you can avoid pretense and denial, face reality just the way it is, and do something constructive with it, even if it might be very hard to hear. Some will think that what I'm saying is pessimistic, defeatist, or even alarmist. But you be the judge. I'm a natural-born optimist, and I've always tended to see the glass as half full. And if it's not, I like finding a way to fill it. Being naturally optimistic, I've learned to be much more realistic, looking first for the truth, not just what sounds good or feels good. So I'll be talking to you as if you're much like me, and you want to deal with the truth just as it is. You've probably heard it said that people generally get the government that they deserve. I've thought a lot about that concept over the years, and I've come to be convinced that it's true, with some good evidence from history to support it. The same idea can also apply to many other realms of our lives. It's really very logical when you think about it. It just means self-determination. Governments and rulers remain in power either by deliberate desire or else by the tolerance of the people that they rule. A dictator is a dictator because the people dictated to allow the dictator to dictate. We can't remain pawns in the hands of others for very long unless we choose or allow ourselves to be pawns. Free people are free not because it's natural, but because they insist on being free. They make the kind of choices that make them and keep them free. Free-thinking people generally believe that every capable adult is personally responsible to make all important choices in life for himself or herself. Yes, bad things do happen to good people in life, but when we allow bad things to needlessly go on, then we've made a personal choice to tolerate the situation in our life. People can enable other people, and entire nations can enable tyranny. Since no government on earth has ever had a monopoly, there's always a choice that we can make to enhance our own lives and our freedom. And if we fail to choose to pursue and keep our own personal liberty, we likely won't have it. When people no longer tolerate their bad circumstances or some unjust, unworthy, or abusive government, then it's up to them to make some kind of a change. It can be a change of or within a government, or it may even mean getting away from the entire situation. These are the basic options. So why am I talking about our responsibility for self-determination? It's because nothing is more fundamental to human freedom than the ability to decide where and how you're going to live, and who gets to be in charge of telling you what you can and can't do in your life. That's absolutely basic, but somehow most people still miss it, and I hope you're not one of them. Over the years, I've come to realize some essential things about freedom. One is that freedom isn't the natural and common state of mankind. Servitude is. There's always some ready and willing oppressor within or without, so freedom must be pursued and then carefully kept and guarded. Another is that it's futile to spend our time just complaining or being angry and frustrated about a country and a government that are irresponsible or unjust. The reason that they are as they are is because we the people are allowing it to happen and to continue. What we actually do about it is what counts. Still another is that nations die by their own hands. When they've gone too far because the people have allowed it to be so, no change in leadership matters very much. A final one I'll mention is that we nearly always have an alternative for more freedom if we'll take it. We shouldn't settle as if there's no other place to go. I believe these things are all true today in America. Freedom was once pursued and insisted on at great cost to this nation, but it wasn't guarded and well kept over the years, and so now it's quickly fading and will almost certainly soon be gone. Many have warned us about this, and they've tried to somehow fundamentally change America's direction and recover what's been lost. Warnings are certainly much needed, but trying to fundamentally change things is quite another matter. The seeds of self-destruction of our country and our liberty have been sown over a very long period of time, starting before we were born. Those seeds began springing up over the decades and have continued growing virtually unhindered into the present deadly choking vines that we live with today. And those destructive vines are now too big, too thick, and too many to be able to somehow prune them back or successfully control them. When a nation gets to this kind of overwhelming stage, it can only be uprooted or replaced, or else abandoned by free people because of its fatal condition. The idea of overthrowing an oppressive American government by violence, just as our forefathers did to the British to start this nation, isn't even an option. Our enemies are deadly forces and effects that we have made or allowed ourselves. In such a circumstance, violence will do nothing good. Realization and wise action will. I've watched America's many seeds of destruction growing up into vines all around me throughout my life, causing so much freedom to be choked out by insidious and subtle incrementalism. This has gone on to the point where I and many others no longer even recognize the country in which we were born. Like many Americans, I've always voted, trying to get and keep good leaders. The reality is, the issue is not simply one of better leadership. It goes far beyond that question to the very heart and soul of who we are as a country and as individuals within it. And that's why America is now in a death watch. Honoring the God in whom our money says we trust has now become completely optional, even for our leaders. Dependence on Him and His guidance of us and our country is no longer taught to our children as it once was. We've allowed many things that are deeply offensive to liberty to long continue. Slavery is an evidence of our historic patience with evil. And now as a nation, we openly approve and defend the ending of innocent lives in the tens of millions before those little ones ever see the light of their first day. Essentially, once starting out to be a free people, we began to decide along the way that we would rather have short-term benefits than long-term freedom. We began to choose irresponsibility over responsibility, pleasure over principle. Many now live careless lives of dishonesty, apathy, and self-centeredness. The majority of Americans are now extremely government-dependent, both personally and corporately. We're blatantly demonstrating that most are willing to take as much money from others as possible by any means, even from our own children and grandchildren, by exploiting the many types of government entitlements and other systems of theft to redistribute wealth. In short, we've lost our character, and in doing so, we've lost our country. This once great nation is now under a virtually certain death sentence. And sad but true, we've gotten the government and the country that we deserve. That may sound like a harsh condemnation, but I'm not condemning this nation. It's not at all my place to do that. I'm just one person seeing and honestly reflecting upon an obvious condition. I wish it weren't true, but the facts keep shouting at us, and to paint them in a better light won't help anyone. I won't take the time to detail over 30 separate primary factors that have combined to bring about this fatal condition of our nation and our liberty. I'll simply tell you that the open evidences are far too many for any rational person to honestly think that the damage to America is somehow not fatal. So many changes have come about so rapidly in recent years that it's not an overstatement at all to say that we now live in jeopardy of the imminent, fundamental loss of our freedom much sooner than we would ever imagine. Recent government plans, procedures, and power grabs, such as the media-ignored but openly available Presidential Executive Directive known as NSPD 51, mean that what freedom we still have in America could now be literally instantly suspended or greatly limited by just one person in a matter of minutes. This reserved dictatorial power, now assumed by the president, can be triggered by any one of many inevitable circumstances. It's now all laid out in written form that the president assumes he may suspend the Constitution and declare martial law, controlling everyone and every system in America if there's a real or even perceived threat to our national security. All it will now take is another attack, some reported threat, a natural or other disaster, financial crisis, health emergency, or even civil unrest. And America's death sentence is very obvious when the economic math tells the story. As I record this, we as a nation are now officially over $13 trillion in debt. Multiples of that official debt don't show up in the deceitful federal cash accounting system. And even the official debt is projected to at least double within just a few years. Unfunded liabilities already committed to Americans in the coming years now total well over $100 trillion and are rapidly growing. The cost of federal, state, and local government combined now totals well over $6 trillion every year, which alone is about $40,000 per year per worker. And now many huge economic time bombs are about to explode all around us simultaneously. One of them is the 77 million or so of my generation, the baby boomers, who have produced more wealth for America than any generation ever has. We're now starting to enter our senior years and are beginning to leave the workforce, taking with us our skills and dedication. We're going to be drawing heavily on Social Security and Medicare, as well as many expensive public pensions. We're living much longer now, and we'll be draining unprecedented multi-trillions of dollars of government funds for ongoing medical care, drug benefits, and other assistance programs. Baby boomers alone will put a strain on all workers, government, and private resources like no nation in history has ever before experienced. Are you getting the picture? America does not now have and never will have enough workers to ever begin to carry the growing mega-trillions of government spending and debt. Because of openly legalized abortion in the U.S. over the past 4 decades, up to 50 million Americans and the many millions more of the children that they would have had will never be here to produce and help carry a growing economic load. America's massive borrowing to make up the trillions lacking each year now grows by several billion dollars daily, and the number of obligations requiring funding are all increasing. Foreign nations such as China are now America's bankers and lenders and are owed many trillions of U.S. debt, and we're dependent on them for more and more lending all the time. These are cold and calculating nations, and they're not in any way our friends. And someday soon they'll begin making their move to hold the U.S. hostage to their demands. As they foreclose on America, this country will then begin to realize that it has become their serfs and their slaves. The standard of living in the U.S. and other Western nations is declining and will plummet deeply as severe depression sets in. The Great Depression was terrible, but the coming depression will be much worse, and now we don't have the reserve of character. It will bring about social chaos, crime, disease, famine, and wars. There's now absolutely no way, even with the most spectacular economic growth imaginable, or attempts by government to cut spending, or printing more mountains of money, or increasing taxation, to ever stop or even slow down the out-of-control roaring train of oncoming national bankruptcy that's about to fly off the tracks and create an unprecedented disaster and depression at any time. The vines from the fatal seeds of destruction are now taking over. Just when the ultimate loss of freedom for those living in the U.S. will come and how it will exactly happen, I can't, of course, say. But I can say for sure that freedom in the U.S. is no longer something that we and our children can expect to wake up to each and every morning as we once did. Even if we would or could elect into office tomorrow all of the best, the brightest, and the most responsible, honest leaders you could find in the nation, all of them combined could do virtually nothing about the overall fatal economic and social condition that we now have and the inevitability of major catastrophe on all fronts that America now faces. The unsinkable Titanic of modern freedom in the world that we call America has already hit the iceberg of its own making, and she's sinking. Changing the captain and the crew or adjusting her policies and direction cannot and will not save the American Titanic now. Only the lifeboats have any real meaning or hold out the hope of escape from the inevitable coming disaster. I completely understand and appreciate the views and sentiments of the many who cling to the idea of American exceptionalism and who continue to hold out the hope for this country's restoration to a bright future. Many say that America has faced the worst before, and it's always overcome its problems. Therefore, we'll just do it again. But that's like a man with a terminal disease reflecting back on the days of his youthful strength and vitality and counting on those days of strength to bring him through. America is no longer what America once was, and it can't do anymore what America has done in the past before the destructive, fatal vines had grown so large and become so pervasive and entangled as to choke the very life out of it. So even with a sincere love for our country and our current lifestyle, we must each ask ourselves, in light of the hard realities staring us in the face, at what risk are we willing to remain here and take our chances on our freedom and our future? And if America is in a death watch, will we be able to escape it in time? Will we have the same choices later that we do now? History painfully and repeatedly teaches us that by the time most people come to recognize the seriousness of the jeopardy they're in, it's nearly always too late to avert it and for most to escape to ongoing life and liberty. No example I could give of this is clearer than what took place just after the Great Depression in the 1940s. World War II and the Holocaust were both happening at the same time.